I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can for all of you to understand, as I do not want to make this very complicated, and I don't want you guys to have a hard time understanding this. So I'm going to make this as simple as I can. But there is a lot to cover, so keep in mind before I get started, I am saying this as someone who is not an expert, far from it, from making a call league, and I am saying this as someone whose call league, personally, is not finished yet. If I did the math correctly, my call league should be over by October of this year. It's been a little bit over a year, it's been a lot of time, it's had a lot of fun, but, like I said, my call league is not over yet. Now, if you do want to make a call league like me, this video is for you. And what I mean by like me, I mean that your call league is not a call universe mode, and there is a difference. My call league is supposed to have an overarching story with characters that get built up from almost nothing to something that hopefully is good and meaningful. It's supposed to have an overarching story, how normal wrestling does, and that is the intention behind my call league. Not a CAW universe mode where it's just universe mode with CAWs. So if you do want to make this call league like mine, then this video is for you. Now, to get started here, you will need some things so that you can start to make your call league. Whatever your call league may be called, whether you have a name at this moment, well, we'll get to that in a little bit. But, like I said, you will need some things specifically, and going in order. Now, what you're going to need first of all is a story to tell. It will be the overarching story for your call story. Your whole call league will be this, depending on how long your call league is or how long you want it to be. Impact Pro Wrestling was designed to be exactly 1 year long. From pay-per-view to pay-per-view, from the beginning pay-per-view of the year, which WWE's equivalent is Backlash, to the biggest pay-per-view of the year, to WrestleMania. That's how IPW was made to look. So my story is made to reflect that year-long journey up until the biggest event of IPW, which we'll find out later. Now, you will need that main story. For example, Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar has been WWE's long-term story for a very long time. That's the best example. It's a story that has spawned and spanned numerous years, and it is their main story. It's the main event for WWE. They've used this matchup multiple times as it's their main story. It's what they are really driving home. But you don't need this very multiple year-long story. Another great story you could tell can be done in a year, as I'm trying to do it right now. But if you want a real-life example of a year-long story, I suggest you take a walk over to New Japan Pro Wrestling last year and watch the great trio of matches between Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada. One at Wrestle Kingdom, the one at Dominion, and the one at the G1 Climax. A great year-long story for Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada. Kenny Omega lost once, he lost twice, but it was a draw the second time, and he won the third time. So currently, Okada and Omega are 1-1-1. Eventually, I really do hope we get a tiebreaker, because having one win, one loss, one draw, well, that's just bad math. Now keep in mind, whoever you want to use for your main story, they're going to need to be mainstays of your call, which is the good thing about having calls, they can't get injured. Now, if you do want, whoever you want to have as your mainstays, they're going to need to be booked correctly and to look correctly in order to get your main story over. Also, intentionally, the guys that you choose for your main story typically are the guys that will be in your main event at your biggest show, such as Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, such as Daniel Bryan, Randy Orton, and Batista, regardless of what you think that situation was. Those are the guys that will go head-to-head at your biggest show of the year. Your WrestleMania, your Wrestle Kingdom, your Bound for Glory, your Final Battle, etc. And they will need to have a linear path to each other. Linear meaning that they meet and they have that match at your biggest show of the year in a logical manner. I think that it's not a good idea to have two guys just go at it at your biggest show, at your main event, and have that build be a month long. You can do it. I am perfectly sure that it is a possible thing that you can do, although I don't think it's a good idea, and I don't think that it's a very well thought out plan if I do see that. I think that your main story needs to be developed through a very long time, and it has its own building. Now, of course, in that year-long story, well, you're going to need to know a little bit about the great art of booking. Like I said, you will need some intelligence about the booking art. Now, booking has the potential to be easy peasy, living extra greasy, or it can be harder than a turd made of solid gold. But it is a very needed part. By the way, if you guys are curious why you're looking at this at the moment, this is how I get my show intros, because this is the only way you can get your show intros. You simply just start the show, and when you start the show, I know I simulated it by the way, when you start the show, that little thing will play, and you will get your show intro, and I record over that. Meaning, spoiler alert, the next episode of Impact Pro Wrestling will take place in Indianapolis. Actually, I don't know what that is. Indianapolis. I don't know what state that is. Okay, someone tell me that in the comment section. So I can do that for IPW next week. But, okay, back to the main thing. You're going to need booking. It's very needed, and I personally plan out every show before the show. Impact Pro Wrestling next week will, of course, be on a Thursday, and it will be the show after Warzone. I have a purple binder that I have actually next to me that I'm going to need to fill up with more paper soon, and every single show that I have ever done currently is in there. I also have my final show, the biggest show, the final pay-per-view, the ending of IPW show planned, because it's my destination. But I have every single show that I've had the entire time I've been doing IPW in this binder, as I needed to plan out everything. Everything from Impact Pro Wrestling episode 1 to Impact Pro Wrestling episode 23. We're not on 23, but everything from where we started at to where we are now. Now, of course, your main story is a story that's going to transcend a very long period of time. You don't have to have your story like that take so much time. So an example would be that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar is WWE's main story, although that story has not been told week in, week out, week in, week out, pay-per-view, week in, week out, week in, week out. Roman Reigns has done things with Samoa Joe, including The Miz and many others. So has Braun with things with Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, and Seth Rollins and Finn Balor, and many other things. The two guys that will be in your main story do not have to be constantly butting heads, but they do need a linear path to each other so that it does make sense why they are together. They don't have to be going at it one-on-one every single week to build up to a story. If that's the case, well, first of all, everybody's going to know it. And second of all, it's going to be a very boring Call League, as they'll be going head-to-head in your main event every week. Whether that be on the interesting shows that you actually want to show, or the boring shows, they'll be going head-to-head, week in, week out, and simply no one wants that. So, while you're telling your main story of Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, you can tell your side stories of Roman Reigns versus Samoa Joe, Brock Lesnar versus Kane, Seth Rollins versus Nicholas the Kid. If you don't know who that is, Nicholas the Kid is the kid that won the Raw Tag Team Championships with Braun Strowman at WrestleMania. I know that because I am slightly addicted to online t-shirt shopping. So what I do every now and again is that I go on my iPad and I simply look at the WWE shop. Looking at it yesterday, found that they released a shirt with Braun Strowman and Nicholas the Kid on the shirt. I don't know why they called him Nicholas the Kid. I assume they could not get his actual last name to fit Braun Strowman, but yes, they did that. I suggest you go look it up. It's not a bad shirt. I'm sure that kid's very happy he has a shirt with his name on it and with Braun Strowman on it. Also, keep in mind, this is a universe mode, so what's reflected here is not how my actual Call League is. It's simply that I simulate every single week. I only go to universe mode so I can get the show intro. And that's really it. But yeah. So, let's move on to the other thing you're going to need. You're going to need someone to use all this booking knowledge on. You're going to need some I don't know, maybe some men, some women. What's a better name for them? Of course, you're going to need cause. It is a call league. Cause are essential to this. Now, the number of cause you need depends on how big your show is. You don't need 150 cause, so keep the number that you do have pretty realistic. Honestly, I think that I'm actually overstocked with cause, that I don't know what to do with some of them, and when the call league is over, I know full well I'm going to be a little bit upset because I have not used some of these guys to their full potential, mainly because I didn't have time, or because I just, well, I couldn't. I had other people that I was focusing on, and they kind of just got pushed to the side. So I recommend that you actually have a small number of cause, around anywhere between 19 to 23. The reason I say that is because while the roster may be a little bit small, the roster is big enough that you can make everyone feel a little bit more important and have some actual depth. Now, I recommend that you have an equal number of cause on your roster, not the number like 19, 21. I mean equal number, if not slightly over or under, of heels versus faces. So if you're going to have 19 guys, then you should have 9 heels, 9 faces, and maybe that one person that is a little bit in between. Making the call, I've actually realized how useful it is to have a guy that's not heel but not really face either. Having that little in between is actually pretty useful. Let's see, your cause will need some personality about them. This is pretty simple. DJ Summer is a great example of personality, having the DJ gimmick. Beast, also a personality, as he doesn't really talk, as he hasn't talked on IPW yet, but you can still kind of see what's going on with him. Danny Myers, also a personality. They're going to need a personality about them. Now, you could do it like I did Danny Myers, where I gave him that Superman nickname, and it was kind of easy to see where the personality was going to come from there. Or you could do it with Beast, and I more or less developed his personality as I've been going on, and as I will go on for the next couple of months. If my math is correct, then the Impact Pro Wrestling Call League should be concluded by October. It's been a long time. It's been a little bit over a year. So some examples that are other could be the phenomenal one, Peter Young. We could also use the All-Star Johnny Star, or we could use Justice, a great example of personality as he's currently useful. There's a lot I could go into about this, but for obvious reasons, I am going to move on. Now, I could go into a lot more detail, but frankly, I don't want to make the video go on forever and ever and ever. But yes, if you have questions, I can probably answer those in the comment section, but this is probably both the easiest thing to understand, yet the hardest thing, because it needs to be sensible. It is easy to understand depending on how you do it. Although let me make this clear that having your guy have a nickname like the excellent Adam Jacobs, Superman Danny Myers, or DJ Summers doesn't necessarily correlate with their personality. A nickname and a personality are two different things, and they should be treated as such. Now, if they kind of merge, that's a different subject, but the nickname and the personality are two different things and should be treated as such. Now, also, of course, equal to cause, you're going to need a brand. The brand just basically decides where your entire call league will take place. Now, you can use this brand a couple of ways. You could have your brand be simply referred to as a series of initials, like ROH or WWE, NJPW, TNA, PWG, and so on. Or you could choose to use the full name, Pro Wrestling Gorilla, World Wrestling Entertainment, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Ring of Honor, Total Nonstop Action, which is actually what TNA's name stood for. I don't think they ever went by Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. I think that was just a thing that spawned out of Impact. Or use a combo of both, as I do. I refer to my colleague as IPW or Impact Pro Wrestling, and it doesn't really matter, although you should stay consistent. Now, it's simply what you want your call to be called, and it is important. You do want to make sure your colleague has a decent name, as it's not the most important thing, but it is the setting for how everything will take place. This is where all the matches, the stories, and anything else will happen. While the pay-per-views are a different arena, it is still in the same brand, so Warzone, Bound for Glory, The Rising, SmackDown, all their own shows, but all exist under the Impact Pro Wrestling brand. Now, what you're also going to need is apparel, and no, I don't mean clothing. I'm referring to what your brand will physically look like. This includes all of your brand's championships, arenas, and pay-per-views. As you see here, we are currently looking at a former pay-per-view power struggle. This would be an example of apparel that I'm talking about. It's just how your brand will come across physically, apart from the name Impact Pro Wrestling / IPW. It's how Raw physically looks with the Raw Arena, how Raw has their Raw Championships made with the Universal Intercontinental Tag Team and Women's Championship. This also does include any kind of clothing that may spawn out of your colleague. If your colleague happens to be massively successful and you decide to create apparel, this does actually correlate to that. Now for some quick tips, I think that your arena should probably reflect what exactly you want to do with your colleague. An example is that IPW was originally supposed to be more like an indie, but with the transition from WWE 2K17 to WWE 2K18, it has grown in size. However, the pay-per-views that I have were always the same size, as I figured they were pay-per-views, so it was okay to make them big. And another tip is to have your championships be visually different. You don't want your championships to be getting mixed up with each other. People should not think that the World Championship is the Tag Team Championship. The Tag Team Championship is the Television, Intercontinental, or United States Championship. And the Heavyweight Championship looks like the Women's Championship. It is a good idea to give all your championships their distinctive look. As IPW's television title has a white strap, IPW's World Heavyweight Championship, as you were saying right now, has this very clean look, or at least I think it has a clean look. I am the one who made it, so what do I know? And IPW's Tag Team Championships has a very circular look to it, so they all look different, and I think in some respects you can all tell the difference between them visually to know that one is not the other. Now, I should tell you that doing a colleague this way, where it has an overarching story, is not an easy task. You guys can probably tell, but the majority of the matches that I have on Impact Pro Wrestling are simulated matches where I have the AI do as it wants, which makes it a little bit easier, but you guys can probably tell the matches that I actually play and edit myself. So it takes a lot of time to do this consistently, and I heavily recommend, mainly because it's very time consuming and pointless, for you to make a colleague just because you can, or if you think that I can do it, that you can do it. You can, but it's a very serious thing, and it takes a lot of time, and it doesn't really make any sense if you really don't want to do it. Doing it because you're bored is not a very good reason to do this. I would suggest that you just play some Call of Duty. It also takes a very large amount of creativity as well, for basically everything you do. The cause, the arena, the championships, the movesets, the entrances for your cause, and the victories, and how the story develops. It takes a very large amount of creativity and a large amount of planning. So if you do want to do that, or you do it like a colleague, I suggest that you really understand what you're getting yourself into before. Before I started IPW, I was doing 2 shows a week. One was WCW, because I like WCW as a name, and I believe IPW was a Thursday night thing. That was my first attempt at a colleague, and it was extremely difficult because I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't understand all the work that I had to put in, and eventually I had to just completely cut it. It was way too much work that I couldn't keep up with, and I'm the kind of person that if I can't do it correctly, then I probably won't do it. So I scrapped that first colleague and made IPW. Knowing what I had got myself into, it's actually been working out pretty well, I think, personally, overall. Like I said, it takes a lot of work and a lot of planning and a lot of thought. It's not something that I think that you should do because you have the power to do it. While you do have the power to do it, it's not something that you should do because you can't. Something that you should do if you really want to do it, or if you think that it will be fun and enjoyable and you're willing to put in the work. But if you're just going to be doing it because you think it's something fun to do while you're bored because you are at home for 90% of the day, that is not a good idea. I would heavily suggest you just go out and get a job and get some money and get a nice girlfriend and take her out to party on the town or paint the town red, as the kids say these days. I think I'm not in touch with the youth. Now, something else that I should tell you is that you need a way to make it all come together. Specifically, you're going to need a way to edit it and release it out to YouTube or whatever way you want to release it out to the large piece of universe that is our current society. I do not have a computer at the moment, nor a laptop. So I don't have a way to edit it on a computer to make it look extra pretty. However, lucky for me, SHAREfactory could also be renamed any time that PlayStation wanted to rename it Editing for Beginners and Idiots. That's the reason IPW is under an hour, as I use SHAREfactory to do it. If I had a computer, the main difference that would really be in IPW is that probably the quality of my audio will be better. Apologies for this, by the way. And that pay-per-views would be one episode, as opposed to having Warzone 1, 2, 3. Warzone would just be Warzone. Now, I do probably recommend you have a computer, as you can do it with SHAREfactory, as I do it, but not gonna lie, it's not the absolute best thing in the world. But I'm pretty happy with it, as I know my current limitations, and I think that what I am doing is currently succeeding. Now, I highly recommend, and I'm really telling you to not do this. If you do make a colleague, don't have your colleague have episode 1, part 1, episode 2, episode 1, part 2, episode 1, part 3, episode 1, part 4, episode 1, part 5, and have, like, every part have one match in it. I've seen colleagues like that, and it's annoying as fuck. I find it completely lazy and ignorant that you could not find a better way to do that. That's a very poor way to get that out there. I believe it is required to make sure that you can make the parts of an episode come together. Episode 1 should be one cohesive episode. Like I said, I am unable to do this with pay-per-views, as pay-per-views are extremely long. I'm pretty sure if you wrapped up my most recent pay-per-view, it would probably be maybe just under 2 hours, if maybe not a little bit over. But besides that, I do try to keep my episodes in one cohesive unit. Now, I do recommend you do that. Like I said, I find it extremely annoying when a colleague has its normal episodes in not one thing. I don't really want to watch episode 2 of Warzone 5 different times because it has 5 different parts. I'm probably going to only watch part 1 and then tune out because I don't really want to watch the rest of it. Like I said, I do that with my own pay-per-views, as it's the only way I can do it, and I try to make it as best I can, but not everything can be perfect. You can ask Jack Smith, and he just got his face punched in by Trevor Jericho and his forearm. And the turnbuckle. Now, the very last thing I want to tell you is that you need to know your limits. I have a mild perfection complex where when I do something, I want it to be the best it can possibly be. If I write a story, if I don't like the beginning, I won't finish it, and if I don't like at the ending, I'll probably throw it away. If I start a drawing and I finish it and I don't like it, 9 times out of 10, it's going in the trash. I want you to know your limits. Your colleague will not be perfect. Impact Pro Wrestling is not perfect. Forever a Movement is not perfect. World Wrestling Entertainment is far from perfect. NXT, far from perfect. New Japan Pro Wrestling, far from perfect. You should very try your best if you do want to do it, and do everything you can to make it the best it possibly can be, but do not kill yourself trying to make it the best it possibly can be. If it's Monday and you haven't slept since Wednesday that previous week because you want to make it better and better and better, then it is bad for your health, and you should probably stop to try to relax and remember that it can only be so good. You cannot put too much work into this. At the end, it is a fun activity and something fun to do. It does require a lot of work, but you should not kill yourself over this. Now, something I also didn't say that I should have probably put in the brand section of this video that I just didn't, is that it is important that you stay consistent with what you do. Now, I realize now that I said that, I'm talking about consistency, and there is no real section for me to put this in. This could be in the brand section, this could be in the cost section, this could be in the booking section, this could be in the story section. Consistency is very important. I find it annoying unless the colleague is very good that the videos that come out are not consistent. Impact Pro Wrestling will always come out on Thursday. At the very latest, it will come out extremely early Friday morning. And I try my best to make sure that the pay-per-views also come out sometime around Sunday. If you have a show that you would like to call Thursday Night Warzone, but it always comes out on a Friday, or it always comes out on a Monday because you got it done early and you figured you release it now, that is not a Thursday night show. I believe it's very important to stay consistent. And that's what I mean by it could go in the branding position. But in booking, it's important to stay consistent because your heels need to be heels. They need to act like heels. Your faces need to be faces. And whoever you have that may be in between should probably stay on that line. That is a difficult thing to do. But a person that is in between as not a complete heel, yet not a complete face, should constantly be on that line of moral ambiguity. And it's also consistent to stay with the story you want to tell. What I would advise you do with the story you want to tell is to sit down one day with a piece of paper, think about a story you want to tell, and then tell that story throughout the length of your colleague. My colleague is 1 year, so my story intends to take 1 year. You might want to do your colleague 1 year to test it out and see how you like it. You might want to use your colleague for 2 years or 3. Now, your story doesn't have to be a full 3-year term, but for a while, it will be your main story. It will be the longest story that you have up to a point, so it should take a lot of time and consideration. And keep in mind that this story can be anything, but it will have to take time to come to its completion and to build properly and have a nice, long, linear path. I hope you guys can enjoy this video. I made this video because a good friend of mine, also a subscriber called Thief Maniac, had asked me during my stream yesterday, during God of War, all these questions about how to make a colleague. I could not answer those questions correctly because I was put on the spot and I didn't really have time to come up with a good, cohesive, respectable answer on the spot. So I made this video. I hope it was enjoyable for Thief, and I hope that all of you guys can enjoy it. And I hope that it gave you some kind of insight into exactly what it is to make a colleague. Now guys, that's going to be it for me. I hope you will have a nice day. I will see you guys in the next one. And until then, whatever the next one may be, good night and good luck. Bang. Peace out.